This is Giuseppe, also known as the Puma, the Gray Man, and the Fluff. Yeah, he's almost 17 years old. He might not have all of his whiskers, and sure, he can be a bit feisty at points, but he's the cat I grew up with, and I love the little guy. For the next week, I'm going to be watching Giuseppe, and I wanted to do something nice for him. You see, right now his favorite spot in the world is here, in this corner, under this little table, by this vent. And as the old boy he is, he deserves a space more luxurious to lounge. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be making Giuseppe's own little fancy house full of all the luxuries a cat would ever want. And it all starts with a big pile of foam board. And the second it was on the ground, Giuseppe was there, letting me know he's going to be watching every step of how he's going to build his house. After giving him some pets, I decided I was going to be building his house in this corner right here. I laid out the foam boards I'm using as the floor, I traced over the overlap, and this is going to be the part that I have to use a hobby knife to cut off the extra. With the extra removed, it was time to attach these parts together. I cut out a bunch of smaller pieces of the foam board that I'm going to be using to hold the boards together. I then pulled out a hot glue gun and I began putting some hot glue on the small pieces and sticking them to the two boards to attach them together permanently. I then cut out a few more smaller pieces that I'm going to be using as spacers just to make sure that this board is nice and flat on the ground. So with the floor complete, it's time to figure out how tall we need these walls to be. So with a bag of treats, a little bit of coaxing, I was able to get Giuseppe over so I could measure him, and I ended up landing on 16 inches. So we'll make the walls 16 inches high. Nom 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 nom. So I grabbed another piece of foam board from the pile, I took my tape measure, I marked it at 16. Using another foam board as a straight edge, I traced a line and then I cut off the extra for the wall. And I'm not going to say Giuseppe sitting on top of the foam boards made it harder to get work done, but he was definitely a little bit distracting because just look at him, he's like this cute little ball of joy. So with the walls cut out, it was time to start measuring and marking some openings. I pulled out the measuring tape, made a few marks, using a board as a straight edge, I traced out the opening for the door. Then I used a paper plate and I did a nice round curve on it because I want Giuseppe to have a nice curved door. With the door marked up, it was time to cut it out with the hobby knife, and it came out really nice. Giuseppe also needed a window, so I took another piece of foam board as a ruler and I began to trace and cut out a window. And we can see what the front panel is going to look like, but it's still not long enough for the whole width of it, so I have to attach a small piece to the side of it, and again, just like the floorboards, I take the glue gun and begin to stick on a couple pieces to join it together. I also add on these small little pieces that look like teeth, and these are going to be helping to hold the roof in place later on in the build. With the front panel up to size, it was time to do the same to the back panel. I hot glued it together with some joiner pieces, and now we have both the front, the back, and all the side panels. I then start the process of making this small little container that's going to go underneath his window. I'm not sure the correct word for it, but I want to have a plant in it. So I cut off the end of a bottom of Ziploc bag, I place that in there, and I glued that into place to hopefully contain all of the dirt and water later on. I then took some construction paper, I cut out some small pieces, and I glued it to the structure I just made. And then I go ahead and glue this underneath the window on the front wall. I then used the hot glue gun to attach a whole bunch of siding paper to all of the walls on the structure, and this is just going to make it look a lot nicer than the white foam board itself. Then I took the hobby knife and I traced off all the extra. And I really like the way it's starting to look. I then went ahead and repeated the process on all of the other walls on the house, all while Giuseppe was sitting there checking out the piles of paper that I was creating. So I gave him a little scratch and hung out with him for a little while and finished up the walls. With the walls complete, it was now time to start attaching them together. I put a bunch of hot glue in the corner, I held the board there until it dried, and then I repeated the process on the other side. I then added some extra glue just to reinforce it. When the sides were on there, I took the front panel, and then I went ahead and glued that on as well. And we got some walls up, but it's still missing a floor. So I took the floor, I slid it underneath it, I positioned it over top, then I took the hot glue gun and I went around all the creases, putting a whole bunch of glue, all while Giuseppe was snuggled up like a bug in his corner. After finishing up attaching the floor, I test fit in the house in the corner to make sure it fit, and before I could even film it, Giuseppe was inside, inspecting it, checking it out, and letting me know it's looking good. We got the walls up, but it's still missing a roof, so I took the measuring tape, measured a few spots, using another board as a straight edge, I traced out a line, and I began to cut out the pieces for the roof. I did this till I have 4 identical matching pieces. Then I'm going to be taking 2 of them, sticking them together lengthwise with a piece of foam board and hot glue gun, so that I have 2 matching triangle pieces like this. And you can see these are the perfect width for the structure. I then laid out the roof pieces on the ground. I took a bit of white duct tape just to hold it together temporarily. I then went around with the hot glue gun, putting a bunch of glue in all of the seams, making it one solid object. I also made this little handle structure out of foam board, and I just attached it with some hot glue right in the center of the roof, and this is just a handle that I can easily lift up the roof whenever I need to go inside. I took some more construction paper and I covered up all of the roof just to make it look nice and feel more professional and give Giuseppe the full home experience. And I think it turned out great. And you can see we take the roof, we place it, and it fits perfectly on the house, and we can now see how those roof teeth help hold it in place. It's looking good. I can tell Giuseppe's getting pretty excited about what's going on in his home, but there's still a few more things to do, including some furniture. Because yes, Giuseppe deserves his own couch, so I took some bigger pieces of foam board and I began gluing down the structure, and I added some extra beams in the center for support, and then I glued on a little backrest. I then grabbed a bunch of natural fiber rope that I'm going to be using to place around the perimeter of the couch on the outside, because I think it's going to be some nice little scratching posts in case he ever feels like he needs to scratch at something. And I just go ahead and put a whole bunch of glue and layer it all and snip off the extra. Now it's time to make it comfy. I got myself a bunch of this fur stuff from a craft store, and yes, it looks like Giuseppe, but it's not. It's just some fake fur that I'm going to be gluing all over the couch. Hopefully it's going to make him feel at home, like he knows the couch or is comfortable with the couch, and I think it's going to look really nice too. So I glued all the pieces in place, and I took the scissors and I trimmed off all of the extra. And I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's got a nice place to scratch on, it's got the nice comfy top that looks like himself and feels really soft. And then I go ahead and let Giuseppe check it out, and he doesn't know what to quite make of it. He just smells it, checks it out, and then decides to leave. But wait, Giuseppe, there's more. Your TV stand, because yep, you gotta have a big screen TV. I glue together a big stack of foam, I add some paper on the outside, and I fold over the extra. Now it's time for some counter space. I got some really long pieces of foam board that I glue together lengthwise, then I add an end cap to it, then I go ahead and cover it up with some construction paper just to make it look pretty. And now we got himself a little counter space. I then took the cutout for the front door, I glued some paper on top of it, I trimmed off the extra, I covered up some small pieces of foam, and I glued them on to make a nice little shelf unit. And I'm happy with how it looks. Carpet time, because yes, Giuseppe needs his own carpet. I got a big piece of this white felt and I lay it down. It actually perfectly fits inside. And then I take the hot glue gun and I go ahead and permanently affix it to the ground. I then take the counter I made and I go ahead and glue that into place. Next I go ahead and glue in his nice little shelving unit. Then I go ahead and glue in his TV stand as well. I add some glue on top of his counter and I glue in a small little wooden dish and I glue on 2 little bowls as well. Then I take his couch and position it where I'd like it, and if you can see, I put it by the window so I can still pet Giuseppe through it. Rug time. I got another swatch of that fabric that's the same that I put on the couch, except it's zebra shaped. I folded it up and I cut off the corners so when I unfold it, it's a nice rug shape. Then I went ahead and put it in his room. I have a small oval piece of wood and a small little plastic cup. I take a little bit of hot glue and I attach them together, and this makes a little coffee table for my man Giuseppe. And you can tell he's getting real excited because he's rubbing his face on the side of the house. Only a few more steps to go. So I got some of these small little LED light panels that I'm going to be using to light up Giuseppe's new home. I decided to attach them with just some white duct tape just in case I want to move them around or anything in the future. Then in the corner, I took myself a security camera and I taped that into place because yes, we're going to have some cameras checking out what Giuseppe's doing in here. I also installed the second one on the opposite corner. Giuseppe still needs some art. I took some old magic cards with art that I think Giuseppe would appreciate. I took some scissors and I began to cut out just the art section of them into tiny little picture frames. Then I went around with the hot glue gun and I stuck them all over his house in places I think he would really enjoy it. I also added a small little roof cover over his window. Then I took his house and I positioned it into place where it was going to finally sit. And it was time to add some foliage. I got this live catnip plant from the pet store and Giuseppe was super interested with it right away. I wanted to cut it in half and I was first going to use a bread knife, but then I ended up just tearing it in half and I think it worked better. And I also gave Giuseppe a few pieces for being patient and he really liked the stuff. I took half of the plant and I went ahead and placed it inside of his little window plant holder. And I took the other plant and I put it inside of another little plastic cup. And Giuseppe's really enjoying it already. I ended up gluing the little plant holder onto a foam baseboard just so he won't knock it over as easily. I placed it in the corner. I then installed his TV. I put in some new toys I got him, some mice which are his favorite and my favorite, the fish. I put in a little bit of food in his snack bowl, and then I filled up his water dish as well. And the only thing left to do is to close up the roof and to see what Giuseppe does. And right away, Giuseppe was interested. Taking his first steps inside, Giuseppe is not really sure what to make of everything. He's just sniffing around, checking out the TV, then he walks over to the couch, touches it just for a second, and then decides it's not for him right now. But then he just grabs one of his favorite little mice toys and just takes it outside and plays around with it for a little while. Pew! A few minutes later, he does go back inside and he is immediately excited about his big TV. I'm showing him clips from my squirrel movie theater video, and whenever a squirrel comes on, he's super excited about it, which I think is awesome. He bats around his mouse a little bit more, he smells the coffee table, then he stares at the camera. Not before long, it became nighttime, and just looking at his little house when it's night with the light inside of it is just so cool. He's got the window with the plant. We take a step inside and it's just brightly lit. He's got his food bowls, his big TV, his couch, his coffee table, his rug, the shelving. I mean, this place is awesome. I'd be super happy if it was up to my scale. Like, I'd be living in there for sure. But it's for Giuseppe, and he's still enjoying his old spot by the vent. Hopefully he comes check out his new home soon. But later that night, Giuseppe came to check out his home. Really not sure what to make of it, still a little bit scared, but then he notices he has a little bit of snacks and water out. So he makes his way over to the water bowl and starts to drink up his fill. And then he decides that's enough of his home for tonight. Early in the morning, Giuseppe comes back to explore his home, having a sip of water and having himself a little kibble breakfast snack. He's starting to become a little bit more comfortable checking out his home, looking at his fish, looking around, and he can see me sticking my hand through the window, giving Giuseppe a little bit of love. He is a good boy. He then goes over to the couch and stands on it for a little bit. I thought he was going to sit down and relax. He decided it wasn't the time. He then goes around and starts to inspect the carpet, making sure that I thoroughly attached it to the ground. He makes his way over to the catnip window, munches on it for a couple minutes, and then decides his tail is his new favorite toy. It's at this point that Giuseppe does his normal business, playing with the mouse, scratching his face, and just generally being cute. So far, it seems Giuseppe's using his home as pretty much a glorified food bowl, which is alright. He still has yet to go really hang out on his couch, but he's definitely interested in it. He keeps going back to stand on it and check it out, but still hasn't sat yet. But he does definitely keep coming back to eat his catnip. He's a huge fan of it, maybe even too big of a fan of it. I don't know why I expected him not to make a huge mess of it. I should have thought better, but I think he's really enjoying it. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever vacuumed a home inside of a home. And I'm really happy I made the roof easy to come off. I then went ahead and played mouse with Giuseppe. He has a lot of fun always chasing after things. I always remember when I was younger playing fetch with him. We'd throw these little balls and he'd bring them back about half the time. Later that night, Giuseppe came on back to have a sip of water, smell his shelf, and then decides to kick his table over. What a little rebel. He then does a big stretch before exiting into the darkness. Wiggle wiggle. Later in the night, after cleaning up a bit, Giuseppe comes running in his house like something's out there. He becomes real still, crouching, looking, and boom, pouncing into the night. And here it is from the other angle. He's staring at something, he looks at the camera, and boom, he's gone. Early the next morning, after a playful night, Giuseppe comes back in his house for a little bit of a morning snack. Then he makes his way over to the catnip window and munches away. Then he just starts hanging out, cleaning himself, and then all of a sudden, it happened. He's finally sitting on his little couch. The little cute guy is just hanging out and he's even watching TV. I mean, look at him. He's got the ultimate cat setup. Food, water, snacks, toys, TV, little couch. He's just hanging out, living his best life. I love this little guy, and I really hope he's enjoying it. And the funniest thing is he's actually watching the TV. He's watching me make my shelter out of saran wrap, and I think he's enjoying it. I mean, just look at this little guy, just hanging out in his nice little luxurious cat house. And I got the window that I can access and pet him at any time I'd like. I really hope you're enjoying your little house, Giuseppe. You're a good boy and you definitely deserve it. I hope you enjoyed this video and the journey with me and Giuseppe and making his wonderful little house and just see him and hang out and relax in there. This video was a lot of fun to make and I really think Giuseppe enjoyed it as well. Send some love and let Giuseppe know what you think. And I want to say thanks for stopping by, everybody, and I'll catch you all in the next one.